Welcome to Returns to Honor, the online program for addiction recovery specifically written for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hello everybody and welcome to Returns to Honor. My name is Brett, and as always it is incredible and wonderful to be here. I'm excited to talk about these concepts and these principles that help us all become closer to the Spirit and make it so that we can actually return to our Heavenly Father, to be present and worthy to be at the second coming of Jesus Christ. That is the whole point of all of this. How can we get ourselves prepared, as President Nelson has so often admonished, to prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ? And he has given us so much counsel, so much insight, and there are so many things out there to help us in that this is just really so fun to be studying and looking at. Now, I am a licensed clinical social worker by profession. I have been doing that work for years, and one of the key things that I have spent an amazing amount of time in my career working on is that issue of addiction. And as I go into the scriptures and I go into the conference addresses and I look at what is being taught and what are we given in this idea of addiction, it is incredible the depth and the wealth of information. And that's exactly where I was just this last week, contemplating what should I be teaching? What should I be doing on here? How can I be promoting this message in a way that people can receive it? And it was very clear, and just come back to the words of President Nelson and follow what he has already given us. And so let me share with you what I was reading and listening to earlier this week. So this is in October 2017 conference when President Nelson, in his address, the Book of Mormon, what would your life be without it? And whenever the president of the church, whenever a prophet uses the words, I promise, I think it is something that we need to really listen and stand up to. And so as I'm listening to this, and I'd heard it, I don't remember exactly who it was, if it was Caitlin at Anticipating Christ's Return or Jared with Christian Homestead. I faithfully listened to those two individuals, and I encourage you to do the same. But they were addressing, one of them was addressing this section, and it drew me back to it. So President Nelson, in this address, says, I promise. Now those two words, when we hear them from a prophet of God, I think that we should be paying very close attention. I promise that as you prayerfully study the Book of Mormon every day, so now we have our challenge as well as the measuring stick of what we can be doing. Prayerfully study the Book of Mormon every day. So prayerfully study, not just reading, and then how often? Every day. He was pretty specific in giving us a very simple way to do this. If we will do that, prayerfully study what? The Book of Mormon. How often? Every day. You will make better decisions every day. So one of the things that is, pretty evident in a lot of, especially President Nelson's teachings, but in so many other areas, there is a principle and a promise. So all throughout the scriptures we can see this pattern. But there's a what here. I promise. Oh, what do you promise? That as you, and we can come back to as, well, let's just say, I think as is an incredible word. So many times, and maybe in your own head you would have read that if. I promise that if you prayerfully study the Book of Mormon every day. Well, that changes things incredibly, because now there's doubt, now there's suspicion, now there's, if you. if you do that, if this, if that. But when you put in there as you, now there's this really amazingly powerful, I promise that as you, because I expect that you're going to do it. I know that this is something you want to do. Prayerfully study. Before we open up the book, are we asking a prayer? Help me learn what I need to learn, or whatever that is. Prayerfully study, and then the what? The Book of Mormon, and then every day. Okay, and I think we get that. But then the promise. You will make better decisions every day. Oh, that's amazing. But then he goes on. Gee, even that would be phenomenal for me. Then he goes on, I promise. So here we have that again. As you ponder what you study. And I think this is a piece I know that I've missed in my life. That I may pick up the Book of Mormon and read it, but did I truly study it? Did I say a prayer before? Did I study it looking for things? And then as you ponder what you study. So once I close the book, I can't just say, well, that's dust and done. I got to go and head off to work, head off to class, head off to play, whatever it is. I need to let it ponder in my mind. I need to let it stir around in there. I need to let it really sit. As we do that, the windows of heaven will open and you will receive answers to your own questions. One of my favorite questions that I teach clients all the time, that I've taught here in this channel, but it's also the word and the question that I hear so often from my clients, is why. You will receive answers to your own questions. Why does it have to be this way? Why does this happen? Why do I have to deal with this problem? Why have I been given this challenge? Why is this so hard for me? As we prayerfully study the Book of Mormon every day, not only will we make better decisions every day, but a second promise, that then as we ponder what we have studied, the answer to that question, why, will come flooding in because the windows of heaven will open. And now, a third promise. I promise that as you daily immerse, I had to mark that because immerse is so much deeper than even study. Immerse. Where else do we immerse ourselves? We do it at baptism. Baptism by immersion, meaning a full plunging in. When we're witnessing a baptism and did this work, it's because everything went under the water. As we daily immerse ourselves, well, that is a completely different study than just saying a prayer, reading a few verses or a chapter, saying, great, that one's done. Think about it throughout the day. But now, as I promise that as you daily immerse yourself in the Book of Mormon, you can be immunized. Powerful word. I find it very interesting that this was in 2017. What happened just 3 years later? And we had everything going on with COVID and the immunization, the vaccination came out. Here he's giving us the immunization. I promise that as you daily immerse yourself in the Book of Mormon, you can be immunized against the evils of the day, even the gripping plague of pornography and other mind-numbing addictions. Now, for the purpose of this channel and what I am working to bring to everybody, that is the promise that I think is incredible. How do I become immunized against my addiction? How do I begin to overcome it and have the strength to do in life what I desire without this mind-numbing addiction? You daily immerse yourself in the Book of Mormon. And in that we gain our immunization. This is such a huge promise. A huge promise. And I absolutely love it. Then if we look, 2023 General Conference Address, Think Celestial. Another prophetic promise. As you think celestial, you will find yourself avoiding anything that robs you of agency. Isn't that an addiction? Any compulsive behavior. I do it instinctively as if I didn't have a choice. Well, that just robbed you of your agency. Any addiction. And he's going to list off quite a few. Gaming, gambling, debt, drugs, alcohol, anger, pornography, sex, or even food. Now, if you think about that, and the way that I've taught addiction, and I teach on this channel what addiction is, any compulsive behavior, a behavior that just robbed me of my agency, with immediate reward. Well, here we have all of these behaviors that are going to have immediate reward, yet long-term destruction follows. President Nelson understands addiction. He understands this problem. Now, even if that problem is just a really, really bad habit, and it hasn't maybe formed itself into the layer of addiction, it is still robbing you of your agency, and this promise is going to hold. Now, I hadn't gone further in this until this morning as I was reading, but I get to this, because your obsession becomes your God. Now this I have read, but I'm getting to this Solace. I want to talk about that for a minute. Because your obsession becomes your God. That is why these behaviors offend God. You look to it rather than to Him for solace. Now, let me talk about that for a minute, because this is an important principle that I teach all of my clients and everybody who is in the online program. Why do we form addictions? Why do we have these behaviors that come back, as Nephi said, and do so easily beset us? They are trying to create solace. I use the term pacification, a pacifier. I'm not feeling well, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm distressed. How can I pacify that distress, that feeling? And in so doing, I find solace. And then his final counsel: if you struggle with an addiction, seek the spiritual and professional help you need. Do not let an obsession rob you of your freedom to follow God's fabulous plan. What an amazing promise. In 2017, he gave us the key and access to the immunization. Deep immersion into the Book of Mormon every day. Then here, in 2023, he comes back again to it, saying that as you think celestial, and I think that it's really impossible, if you are immersing yourself into the scriptures in the Book of Mormon, we know that that book will bring us closer to God than any other book, said Joseph Smith. That is celestial thinking. Then we are able to find that solace that we're trying to pacify through our behavior. I was talking about this just the other day with one of my clients in the office, and because I had been studying this and because it had been on my mind, I felt to share it with him. He's obviously a member of the church. And I said, when you immerse yourself, I believe it was Elder Bednar. I need to go see if I can find this, but I do believe it was him that was talking about daily reading in the Book of Mormon, and how sometimes we get ourselves trapped by the idea of, I have to read a certain number of chapters, or I have to read a certain number of verses, or I have to read for a certain number of minutes. I don't believe that that necessarily is an immersion that's going to give me anything to ponder. And it's reading, but is it study? And I think those are really important questions. And so what I was saying to my client was, I had remembered this general authority, I believe it was Elder Bednar, say sometimes their study in the Book of Mormon will be one verse. Because when they go in prayerfully and they look at that verse and they really begin to immerse themselves into what is in that verse, the depth of it starts coming out as they look at the footnotes, as they look at what the meaning of one specific word is, and why is that the word that's there, and how can I apply this into my life. And so immersion doesn't mean I've been able to power through and I read the Book of Mormon in a week or just a few short hours or whatever that is. We can be caught and stuck for days on a single chapter. So I want to pivot and shift gears here after laying down that foundation, and I'm going to start a new playlist where I share with you my ideas and insights as I study prayerfully and immerse myself into the Book of Mormon, so that I can have access to and knowledge of the immunization that we need against these substitute gods, these addictions, these behaviors that keep us from God. And so as we jump in, let's look at this. I want to go where I am right now in my study in Alma 43. Now, as we got going out of that incredible chapter, Alma 42, where we had talked just a little bit ago, and I have a whole episode on that I'll put in this playlist. I turned to Alma 43 and I read the heading. I'm like, oh, okay, great. We're going to go into another one of the war stories. Okay. And I began to feel my head settle in as if I was shifting. No, there's not going to be much more in this. The Lamanites got mad. The Nephites defended themselves. And here we go. Battle after battle after battle. How long are these chapters? And I thought, whoa, wait a minute. And I pulled back, and 2 mornings ago, I shifted the way that I was reading this. And all of a sudden, I got a glimpse of what President Nelson was talking about, and I want to share that with you here. So, chapter 43 in the Book of Mormon is an amazing chapter when it comes to the Book of Mormon giving us immunization against our addictions. Now, let's dive in here. The very first thing that came out to me as I was reading is, it came to pass that the Zoramites became Lamanites. Now, why is that so important, and what's the big deal about this? And my note that I came here is, once with us, now against us. They were once Nephites and not an enemy. So it was with many forms of addictive behavior. And if you think about the list, let me jump back over there. If you think about the list of things here on President Nelson's list, gaming. Is there anything wrong with having some gaming in our life? No. Even in the old family home evening manuals, it would talk about having a family game night or playing games together. But when something as simple as gaming becomes compulsive and is stripping us of our agency and has become a god, or it's my go-to when I'm distressed, here's something that was once friendly to me and now is an enemy. Gaming, debt. Sometimes in order to buy a house, in order to buy a car, In order to go to school sometimes, debt has to be incurred. But we can also become enslaved by it, and we are robbed of our agency because that is now an addiction, to buy, to consume, to just put it on credit. Drugs. Some time ago I had to go to the ER and met my mother who had already made it there, and they were in the ER. They were giving her medication for pain. It was fentanyl. And immediately my heart sank and my mind started to race, because I've had clients who've lost children to fentanyl. I've had clients who have lost their own life to fentanyl. I have watched people in their addiction over fentanyl. And here we are, and the nurse is pushing it in through the syringe and the IV to my mom. And yet in that place, in that capacity, it was absolutely right. Drugs, alcohol, the Book of Mormon tells us it's not for the belly, but for the washing of the body. It doesn't say no alcohol. It says alcohol in this capacity. And we could keep going through this list. Anger has the same usefulness. Pornography, sex, even food. If it becomes our obsession, if we've lost our agency over it, sugar is one of those things that is highly addictive and strips our power away from us and robs us of our agency. So, all of these things, all of that to show and to say, all of these things are now against us. Once with us, now against us. The Zoramites were once Nephites and weren't enemies. They weren't a problem. They weren't trying to fight them. And so it is with many forms of addictive behavior. These are things that in the correct place and time if I don't fix this now, I know myself and I will forget. In the correct place and time, and clumsy fingers with the R, with the correct use, like the fentanyl in my mother in the hospital, have been and are friendly or useful. Now, this is important as we move through, because if we think about our behaviors, if we think about addictions, we think about the things that take us away from being worthy or feeling worthy or being able to access the temple, access the Spirit, and it is taking us away from who it is that we want to be. When we honestly look at them, we find that a lot of them are things who once were with us but now are against us. As we keep going, you guys can lay down some leadership issues and some of the problems that were going on. And here we jump into the core of really where this opened up for me. Verse 9, and now the design of the Nephites. Design is a hugely important word here. And something that I teach my clients all the time is we have to be able to answer the question, so what? When you talk about your goals, when you talk about your desires, when you put it out, this is what I'm doing, I guarantee you somebody, maybe even someone who was once with you and now it feels like they're against you, is going to question you. And they're going to wonder, why are you doing that? Why do you want that? Why is that important to you? If we cannot answer that question with a clear "so I can," now the designs of the Nephites, and they listed them out to support their lands, their houses, their wives, and their children, that they might preserve them from the hands of their enemies. Well, I think that's pretty important. I'm going to do all that I can to defend all of these things that I love against my enemy. They might preserve their rights and their privileges, yea, and also their liberty. Liberty here, I think, is really important, because if I have, as President Nelson warned, been robbed of our agency, then I can clearly interpret that and impose here, I've lost my liberty. I don't really have a lot of privileges if I've lost my agency. That they might worship God according to their desires. If we do not know, as Seneca said so many, many years ago, if you do not know what port you're making for, no wind is the right wind. One of the most important things that you've got to do, and we have to think about when it comes to shifting and changing and altering a behavior, is that I'm not just eliminating a behavior, I have to exchange it for something better. I have to know why. I have to have a clear, I need to be honest and open about the designs, my desires. And so, even in a chapter in the Book of Mormon talking about a war, this is so amazing because the principles are deep and rich. And it is a war. When we're looking at how Satan is trying to steal away from us our agency and rob us, I see that as a war. Now, this to me, it just jumped out at me. I hadn't seen it before, but let me, so tricky when I'm on my computer. This he did. Now, he here is looking at the leader of the Lamanites. But he, in this situation, I would say we could impose there the object, the behavior of our addiction. We could even say that this is Satan. He did, he might, he did that, stirred up the Lamanites to anger, that he might usurp great power over them, lose your liberty, be robbed of your agency, and also that he might gain power over the Nephites. Again, if something or someone has power over us, we have truly been robbed of our agency, and we do not have that which we need to succeed and move forward. That he might have power over the Nephites by bringing them into bondage. That is addiction. That warning right there about what the leader of the Lamanites, and later in here I've highlighted Lamanites, and I said when we read this, if we will read Lamanite as addictive behavior, the entire nature of this chapter is just huge and changes dramatically, and it applies to us today. And this is what I was talking about with Elder Bednar. Just one verse, if we will slowly immerse ourselves in, just explodes and opens up. And I love it. And it is so important that we look at these stories in the language of our time and our need. I better mark this. Okay. So with that in mind, that the whole objective of Satan and the purpose of an addiction, not the purpose, there's other purposes, but the end result of it is that it will usurp power over us and strip us of our liberty and bring us into bondage. That's pretty incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And we need to know the designs, our goals, our hopes, our aspirations, our desires, our goals. Okay, so scrolling on. Verse 9, beginning in verse 8, huge when we're starting to look at this. Alma 43. I hope that you got your books open, or that you're going to go and study this for yourself. Listen to the Spirit and see what it says to you. Because this is what it's saying to me, but I think there's a lot of application here. If they were to fall into the hands of the Lamanites, or our addictive behaviors, or those things that were once with us and now they're against us, whosoever should worship God in the spirit of truth, the Lamanites would destroy. We try to worship the true God, the living God. When we are under the power of our addiction, it has become our God. And we cannot serve two masters, as the Bible tells us. Again, so much, if we will slowly immerse ourselves into each verse. What is this saying? What is going on here? Let's scroll down to my notes. Verse 12. And the Nephites would not suffer that they should be destroyed. Therefore they gave the lands for their inheritance. My note that I put on this was really important, because I was thinking about myself even. But when it comes to these behaviors that do so easily beset us, as Nephi has given, and I know I put that out a lot, but it's such an incredible phrase, and one that we can reflect on. What am I willing to give up? Am I willing to give up lands, my own land, so that my enemy will back off and get away from me? What am I willing to give up? What price am I willing to pay to lose this bondage? Let me scroll down. Verse 18. Now we're getting into some that jumped out that I really wanted to teach here, because here at Return to Honor, the whole purpose of this is to help you overcome, break free, and no longer be in bondage. And it came to pass that he met the Lamanites. Now this is really important. I didn't mark this, but it's something that I teach, is that we need to turn into and towards our temptations. In fact, I'll link it in the end of the show. There is an entire episode on leaning into our temptations, and when we do that, when we meet the Lamanites head on, face to face, we need to have some tools. He met the Lamanites, and his people were armed with swords and with scimitars and all manner of weapons of war. Now my note here is, what are your weapons? What are your weapons you are aimed with to battle Satan and temptation? And as I was sharing this insight with my wife and what I had been reading and stuff, I mentioned, I said, so many times the quick knee-jerk answer to that is simply, well, I read my scriptures and I pray and I go to church, and we get all these really wonderful seminary answers. But are those our weapons? Is that armor? I see that maybe as the practice with the armor. What am I going to say? What tools am I going to use? What weapons am I bringing into the battle so that I have power to defend myself, and I'm able to get in and face it head on, and then get out because I took with me all manner of weapons? That is so important. I think it's huge, honestly, to me, because, again, in a conversation with another client just the other day, we were talking about what tools are you gathering and putting in your toolbox. Because in his addiction that he's working on, some things have been working in some moments, other things aren't. But yet they change. And I mentioned, this analogy of the toolbox, because in my shop, I said I have basic hand wrenches, and then I have various socket wrenches, and then I have a powered ratchet that gives a little extra torque. Then I have a really long ratchet that has leverage, and I can use it as a cheater bar. And if all else fails, I can go to my impact torque wrench. There are all manner of weapons to try to defeat a stuck bolt. Well, we need to be thinking as well in our arsenal against our enemy. What are our weapons? Because in one moment, thinking good thoughts, changing direction, trying to redirect our thought, or, going to a meeting, or finding somebody to go talk to, that's going to work. But what weapon are you going to bring out when there isn't a meeting to go to and you can't get anybody on the phone? Because now I need another tool. I need a new weapon. And so we need to gather into our arsenal, into our toolbox, all manner of weapons, so that we are able to confront and meet the Lamanites, our enemies. Verse 19. Moroni had prepared his people with breastplates, with arm shields. Yes, and also shields to defend their heads, and they were dressed with thick clothing. Now, obviously, if you've read and studied and been around, oh, dang it, it didn't take. But the link here, I got to scroll down, excuse me. Ephesians 6:14, stand therefore having your loins girt about with truth, having on the breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness, it's a process. The righteous desires. Sometimes our behaviors and our desires aren't meeting up, but are we still righteous? We're working on it, and we have forgiveness. So please don't get tripped up on that word. We can dress ourselves in the breastplates of righteousness, the shields and protections. And as we repent daily, as we immerse ourselves into the Book of Mormon, that protection starts to grow and strengthen for us. So please put on the whole armor of God. And as you do, it truly will protect you, because the Lamanites came in naked for the most part, except for a loincloth. They had weapons, but they didn't have the other protection. And so both are essential. Both are essential. Continuing down, and when I skip like this, it doesn't mean that there's not great stuff in here. Just I want to get to the pieces that jumped out at me that I felt I needed to share. And he caused that all the people in the quarter of the land should gather themselves together against the Lamanites, defend their lands and their country, their rights and their liberties. So now we're back again to this idea of what is your design? What is it that you're fighting for? What's your answer to the so what? With a so I can. And they gathered themselves together against the Lamanites. It's not a solo battle. We must bring together like-minded people in a single place so that we can all have community and strength. So that is what the whole purpose of Return to Honor is, whether it's the community here on Facebook, whether you've joined the group on WAP and are being in those groups that I'm running there. We have to gather ourselves together because we can't do this in isolation. It doesn't work to hide and to not come out and talk and ask for help. Now, let's go into verse 29. Moroni knew the intention of the Lamanites. Grab this note here. So I've paired it into my group that I have addiction. But here, let me really jump to this. Study your addiction. Know it. Understand its tactics. Sun Tzu in The Art of War talked about knowing thy enemy. Moroni knew the intentions of the Lamanites. This is so important and huge. If we haven't studied the nature of the substance we're in, say it's a sugar addiction. We're not even going to go into addiction to fentanyl or anything, more incredibly difficult. But do I know my enemy? Have I gone in and studied it and looked at what is the impact of it on my body? How does it react in me? How is it going to fight back when I start to have withdrawal? We need to know the intentions of our enemy. Here, Moroni knew that the intention was to destroy. Absolutely it is to destroy. Satan is going to use these addictive behaviors any way he can to destroy our liberty, our agency, to subject them and bring them into bondage, to lose our agency. Every time we fall ourselves into an addiction, into a behavior that has become so compulsive that we don't have agency over it, we're in bondage. It has control over us. He also knowing that it was the only desire of the Nephites. Only desire, singular. Their so what response, and so I can. Here's where I made this note. If you do not know your so I can, you cannot go up against their so what. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Because we have to have a desire that is singular. So that when the temptations come in the various ways that they're going to come, we have the weapon to come up against it and battle against. And we have to be able to be so clear, this is why I'm doing this. This is what I want. Our only desire is freedom from bondage. To preserve their lands and their liberty and their church. Therefore, he thought it no sin that he should defend them by stratagem. I don't either. When we're going up against something that is so divisive, so cunning, so overtaking of our ability, we had better have some strategy and fight back and push back. Because if we don't, it will always get on top of us. It'll surprise us. Having placed his armies according to his desire, what is that desire? Here, knowing the desire, he established a plan, is what I wrote, but their desire was freedom. Their desire was not to be in bondage. And so, knowing his desire, he was then able to build a plan. Again, back to Seneca, if you don't know what port you're making for, no wind is the right wind. It won't matter. Let the wind change. We don't know where we're going. We don't know why we're fighting. I don't know why I want what I say I want. We have to know what we want so we can build a defense around it. Then they encircled the Lamanites. This is so important and huge for me. We must attack and surround the addiction on all sides. We aren't afraid of it. You don't hang your head in shame and avoid it. These guys encircled the Lamanites. And to me, this was like, wow, what am I supposed to do? I need to identify the tactics of my enemy. I need to figure out what it is that they want over top of my desire. I need to lean in and face them. Not only that, once I've gathered together all the supports I have, I encircle and I lead this thing. Again, this is one of the chapters about a war. But as we look at it, we realize that the war that we're in, the war for our salvation and our righteousness and the ability to truly do these things, this is no different, and I love that. I absolutely love that. I hope you guys are having as much fun looking at these things as I do, because it really gets, I guess I kind of nerd and geek out on this a little bit, but President Nelson's right. When we immerse ourselves into the Book of Mormon, it is rich with everything that we need, everything we need to be able to be immunized against these things. Now, the work of death commenced on both sides, but it was more dreadful on the part of the Lamanites. Are there going to be casualties? Are there going to be times when we aren't successful? Yes, absolutely. But if we have prepared ourselves with these tools, we will be more successful than our enemy. And I loved this. Their nakedness was exposed. When you begin to establish your fortifications and defense, the weakness and exposure of the enemy, the addiction, is going to be shown. It's going to be made known. We're going to be able to see it because it'll be exposed. We'll begin to hear the lies and the twists and the, if this, well, this isn't exactly the same thing, so it doesn't matter. And we can do this and I can do that. And those are what are going to get us in trouble every time. But those are the tactics and the tools that become exposed. Okay. Thus the Nephites did carry on the work of death among the Lamanites, meaning because they had a strategy, because they had a desire and a goal, and they knew what they were doing, and they knew their so what, they were able to overcome their enemy. And in this reading, we're reading that as addiction behavior. And it came to pass that the Lamanites, being frightened because of the great destruction among them, even until they began to flee. We are all powerful when we use all of these tools and the way that the prophets taught us. We have all power over our addictions. Absolutely believe that. Absolutely teach that, and we'll continue to preach that. This is so important. Verse 40. So the war is over, and now he's telling us he kept his soldiers around. What does that mean? How can that apply to me? And I'm like, do not be left defenseless. Apparently I didn't finish that note there. But what this to me says is that he retained his armies on the banks of the river Sidon, that they should not cross. Just because they had become victorious, just because they had gained a victory, they didn't put down their defenses. Satan is going to find a new way to make an old weakness, an old craving, an old behavior, something that has leveraged in the past against us. He's going to try to figure out another way to cross our boundary. And so we can't just say, well, that was fun, that was interesting, I'm glad I made it through that, and put down our defenses. We still immerse ourselves daily in the Book of Mormon. Now that we've got on top of it and we're able to go to the temple, we go to the temple to gain the strength there. You do not put down your defenses just because you've overcome. Verse 43 and 44. The Lamanites did fight exceedingly. Yea, never had the Lamanites been known to fight with such exceeding great strength and courage. Addiction is going to fight back. The cravings, the psychological and the physiological dependence is real. and it's going to fight back. It will not want you to defeat it or abandon it. It doesn't. It needs to be dominant over you. It needs to have power over you. And I use the example of a tantruming 2-year-old all the time, because when I tell the 2-year-old they can't have the cookie, what do? Okay, well, thanks. I didn't want it anyway. No, usually they throw a fit. They throw a tantrum, and they have a little come apart. Our addiction is going to do the same thing. It's going to come back. It's going to figure out a way to get in. And we are never going to have known the fight that it's had, the great strength and courage that it's going to throw at us. When you try to change and shift and move, it's going to act exactly like the Lamanites did here. Verse 44, speaking of the Zoramites, of the Lamanites, they did fight like dragons, and many of the Nephites were slain by their hands. Remember, these used to be Nephites and had defected from the faith. Now, they did so they did so they could destroy the Lamanites. They were so angry. They were so really warped in their power and their obsession with it. They fought like dragons. Now, what does that say to you? If your enemy is coming at you and fighting like a dragon, you're either going to need to match that level of fight, or if we don't feel like we can do that, we need to be so aware of their tactics that we can build a strategy against their ferocity. That is how we win this fight. Because I don't know that I have the strength in me to fight like a dragon all the time. But I do have the ability to build strategy and use that strategy to my advantage. It's going to be coming at me in its anger and its rage and its desire to put me into bondage. I'm coming at it from a faith, of strength, of mental capacity, and with defensive weapons. That will always win out over just pure anger and energy. Okay, those are the ones that I marked in this chapter. But what a powerful chapter. And so when you start thinking about this idea of, when we start thinking about this power of immersing ourselves into the Book of Mormon and what it has for us to be able to push back and fight against, isn't that incredible? Alma 43 gives us so very much. And when we go back and read and look on what I did earlier about Alma 42, the power in each and every one of these chapters, and sometimes even in just the verse, of giving us the strength that we need so that we can overcome and push back against these addictions. It is so incredible. President Nelson's amazing promise that if we will immerse ourselves daily, we will become immunized. I believe it is true. I know that it is true. President Nelson does not speak in niceties. Excuse me, my throat is getting dry. And squeaky, apparently. But if we will listen to the prophet, if we will follow his counsel, if we will heed his admonition so that we can receive the promise. Now, I use the word if. He used the word as. As we do this, I know that the promise of President Nelson is true. And it can give us strength to overcome these addictions and to be able to fight against our own Zoramites. And that is my absolute promise. Those of you who have been here a while know that I have an online program that I'm building, Return to Honor, for those who are ready to jump. I'll put a link in the description so that you can go and learn more about that and ways that you can gather together into a community that's fighting against these addictive behaviors. Look for these in the playlist Book of Mormon Study, and I'm going to begin bringing these on a regular basis as I study and gain the strength and the immunization that is promised. And I hope that you'll come with me. Put your comments and thoughts, your own experiences in the comments so that we can talk about them and bring it into new discussion later on. Take care.